Hey everybody, I am back. I am back. What? I'm back. It is time for Gilded Age, episode 6, HBOmax. Let's get it on. Everybody, it is me, Infamous Kiki. You guys are like, where are you at, girl? Where is my Gilded Age review? I'm here to do a Gilded Age review. I got my notes. My name is Infamous Kiki. I give a review and a breakdown of Gilded Age. I bring you, spoilers. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the episode, please go watch the episode and come back here. Like I said, I review the episode. I'll bring in the history that you may not have known or didn't even know you even cared about, but I try to bring this story to flesh it out, bring it more to life. And then if there's any kind of African American history, of course, your girl's going to focus on that. So let's get into episode 6. The title of episode 6 is Heads Have Rolled for Less. And we'll be doing episode 7 also very soon, within the next couple of days, and get episode 8 to get us back on track before I go on vacation. And I'll post videos of my vacation. I'll do like a little vlog thing. And then if you look at my lovely background right here, this is actually designed by me. So if you are wanting to support the channel, want to support me, or just being curious as to who I am and what I do work a regular job, but I also own 3 Etsy shops. So the way to support the channel is take a look at my Etsy shop. It helps the algorithm in my Etsy shops too. Like, share, subscribe to this channel. Comment below if you have something to say. And let's get it. Okay, so we left off in episode 5. At the end of episode 5, it kind of ended on a cliffhanger where the Russells ended up having, they got a telegraph saying that there was a train accident with one of the Russells' trains that he owns, because he's like a railroad magnate. So they got into an accident. So in this episode, you see that Clara Barton was on the scene. She was helping. There's 5 people that actually passed away. They dropped Clara a big old check for her helping, and the newspaper was there, and the Russells were there, and they had to take a picture. They're basically doing damage control and spend control of the situation, because train accidents were a thing that happened. Of course, any accident with any kind of locomotive, you're going to happen. But we're going to get into a deep dive about trains and train accidents. So let's talk about trains. So back in the day, working for a railroad was not the ideal situation. Let me tell you. They were something called working at a railroad. There was all kinds of accidents, and the sensational big accidents made the newspapers. But the average everyday worker who worked at a rail yard was in danger. Like during the 1800s, there were all types of accidents. There's something called a railroad surgeon, which this is something you won't see in railroad museums around the country. This is something that you don't see, but they had rail yard surgeons who were there because there were all kinds of accidents. People were being asked to work in dangerous situations. The companies were there for profit. They didn't have the same concept of safety and OSHA like we have now. If the workers died or were injured, there was some compensation. But with management, it was like a necessary evil, a necessary risk to pay off somebody if their leg got cut off. Around 1849, the railroads began to hire doctors, and then they would take money out of their salaries to pay for it. Around the 1890s, there were 6,000 railway surgeons across the country. And there was a National Association of Railway Surgeons. Jesus, if I can talk today. And their patients were, sometimes tied up a rope, old rags, soiled handkerchiefs, anything lying about. The patients would have a injured limb that would be just shredded. Like, working at the railroad was so bad, they were calling it, you're going into the jaws of death. A lot of the materials that were made with these trains, as you can see in the episodes, were shoddy materials. Now, as to whose fault was that, sometimes it was the upper management owner's fault, pushing for, productivity, push to have these trains made at a quicker pace, and then they needed to cut costs and make more money. And then sometimes, as you can see later on in the episode, people skimp the owners of these railroads would buy materials at a certain cost, but then the person who was building the trains would go and get cheaper materials, which happens in a lot of industries back then. And it even happens to this day when you're talking about home building, how you would ask for one thing and then they would go buy like cork wood instead of like real wood. So yes, and here's just a little bit example of some of the railroad and railway accidents and the total mangleness of it. And it looks sad and depressing. I'm not going to show anything like, hurt people or anything like that. Just showing you what the trains look like when they got into an accident. So that's a little bit of history of the railways and the railroads and how it was back then. And it was a dangerous profession. And by the way, a lot of African Americans worked on these rail yards because that was it. They did pay good, but it was a dangerous profession. And one of the ways that a person could make money if they're African American during the Gilded Age, the men, of course, was working on a rail yard, doing very menial work. Building the railroads itself was backbreaking, hard labor work, laying down those iron tracks and putting in those spikes. And, it was hard work. And a lot of poor whites and blacks and other minorities worked this type of menial work. So anyway, so we get on to with Marion and Agnes and I would say the aunts. Let me just call them the aunts. They're talking to Marion, and she is Miss Russell found out that she's gonna have another meeting, and they're gonna talk, and Marion is invited. Of course, Marion wants to go there because Mr. Rakes is there, but she doesn't tell her aunties that. So Mr. Russell is trying to investigate and figure out what happened. He's talking about hiring Pinkerton. Pinkerton at that time was a high-profile detective agency. You may have heard them in a lot of previous movies, a lot of Wild Wild West stories. Pinkerton was the go-to company for people if you want to do some kind of investigative or bounty hunter work, or they had marshals working for them. Pinkerton was the premier thing. You can look them up. We'll get into maybe Pinkerton a time later, but they have a whole history. A matter of fact, one of the first African American like deputies and African American, like anybody any kind of authority or there to do investigative, Pinkerton hired black men. They were one of the first companies to hire African American people. I guess Pinkerton didn't really care, as long as they can go catch fugitives, and collect these bounties, and then do an investigation. They didn't really care. They were one of the first companies to hire African American men. So as a full-fledged detective agency. So we get on to Marion is going to meet with Mrs. Russell. And they're going to meet Clara Barton, and the women, the society women have a charitable organization group. And as they get there, Mrs. Morris is there again. Child, what? And Mrs. Morris is calling Mrs. Russell a murderer, and all kinds of stuff. She wilding out, right? She don't want, and so she don't think Mrs. Russell should be there. Mrs. Russell walked in and was like, who talking about me? What y'all talking about? What y'all said? Who? What? And so basically, Mrs. Moore's like, well, if she here, I'm gonna leave. And then they all was like, they all didn't want to say nothing. So they have a vote. They were like, okay, if you want Mrs. Russell to stay, raise your hand if you want to leave. And basically it boils down to money. Like they was like, oh, well, yeah, they really need her money in this organization. So they all raised their head. They wanted her to stay. So Mrs. Morris left. I know this is not going to be the last of her. So just don't count her out. So Clara Barton is there. She asks Marion about Mrs. Chamberlain because, Clara Barton is a very shrewd person. She asked Peggy to come in there. She told Peggy that she had read an article about the Red Cross and she's trying to get support from all communities. Like I said in my other videos, please go watch my previous videos. I talk extensively about Clara Barton, her friendship with African American civil rights abolitionist groups, with Frederick Douglass. She wrote Frederick Douglass. Clara Barton truly had, wanted the Red Cross to be a help for all and needed as much help as she could, not just financially, but socially and politically, to get the Red Cross up and running. So they leave, and then we get to the point where they're trying to hail a cab because Peggy saying that she has to go back to Brooklyn to visit her family. So they're trying to hail a cab, and I see that things don't change. They're trying to hail a cab, and they have their version of a cab is a horse and carriage back then, and then a man stops, but he doesn't want Peggy to get on, and so she, Marion was so shocked and appalled that I can't believe that guy was so mean. We should do something, and then Peggy was basically telling her like, look, if I had to sit here and right every wrong every time somebody slighted me, I wouldn't even make it anywhere. And I just kind of chuckle because things don't really change today because a lot of people in New York complain that as a black person they won't give you a lot of cabs won't stop for you, and not a lot, but I'm saying some won't stop and pick up black people. That's like a running joke in New York, that especially in Manhattan, that I've heard that they have a hard time hailing the cab. So I thought that was funny. Peggy got up there, stuck her hand up, and then she's like, you have to wait till the one that doesn't have an issue is going to pick you up instead of you selecting a cab. And so, Marion, she's learned a little bit here and there, but, it speaks to today. I think a lot of people who are not black, who are not African American, kind of take it for granted that, people treat you a certain way or don't treat you a certain way. Or I've gone to places where they thought I was by myself, and then I had somebody with me, like my sister-in-law who's Caucasian, and they didn't know that we were together, and they would greet her and smile at her, and then she would just look over at me, and then she would glare at them, and then she'd be like, this is my sister, hello, because that's just how my sister-in-law is. She ain't the one. Like, she'd be like, hello, she'd be like, okay, we're together. Then they realize we're together, and they're like, oh, okay, how can I help you? And then they start being nice. Yeah, this is what you have to go through. My anecdotal time, I've had a flat tire and nobody stopped to help me. I live in a very nice upper middle class neighborhood, I would say, and I've had flat tires, I've been stranded, and then I've had friends ask me who aren't black, like, well, didn't nobody stop to help you? No. Didn't anybody? No, I don't know how to change a tire. I had to call roadside assistance if I had it. If not, I had to call, my mom to come get me or something. I've been on the road plenty of times and nobody has stopped. People just kept on driving and looking and not stop to help me. And people think, well, because you're a woman, you have some kind of special magic or something. Well, I'm telling you, I've had many flat tires. I've been stranded. My car broke down. I think only twice in my life has I had anyone stop to offer any kind of assistance. Even when I had my children with me, I had people drive by and was like, okay. Even when my children were younger. My kids are younger. My kids are under 12. So Even when my kids were little, like my daughter was still in diapers and my son was like 5. I'm out there with my kids in the heat in the middle of Texas, and nobody stopped to help me at all. I mean, I'm not going to stay up there and flag anybody down. I'm not going to do that. But I've had people I know that got stranded, and they're like, "Oh, I was stranded, and somebody stopped and helped me." They like, "I can't believe nobody helped you." This is my experience. This is my experience in America. Okay, like nobody will help you here. I mean, I don't know what it is for other places, but I know in my state of Texas, in my nice, well-to-do suburb, a lot of people, if they see that you're a person of color, will not come and help you. That's just, it is what it is. Even if you're a woman, especially if you're a man, I'm assuming, but I'm not a man. I don't know any black males been out here, but I know as a woman, as a black woman, I no one's gonna show me any kind of concessions because, oh, she's a woman. Like, I've had people just pass me on by and keep on stepping. So I thought that was funny. And so then we get on to Mrs. Fain and Mrs. Russell, and Mr. McAllister wants to visit her and everything, and she tells her husband, and her husband kind of snaps at her like, 5 people done died, a company may be in trouble, and you worried about Mr. McAllister visited. Like, he kind of went off on Bertha. Like, I was like, he had to check her a little bit, and he was like, okay, now look, you so one-sided, but she just seems unbent and unbothered. So I guess I don't know if she has faith in her husband or faith in the situation. I don't know what it is, but she was just like, I was like, okay, girl, that's it's kind of shallow and cold-blooded, but okay. So, Mrs. Fain told Mrs. Russell, that they need to have a set. Mr. McAllister has agreed to come, but he's coming for lunch, right? He's coming for a luncheon. So she tells Mr. Russell, you have to have it as a English style setting, not a French style, not an American style, English. Now, let me explain that. Okay, whenever they were coming to them having luncheons and dinner parties and things like that, as you will see in the episode with what happens later with Mr. Bannister and everything, he's telling them where the fork needs to be, where the spoon needs to be. The old money did it the English way because, again, a lot of these money people, their ancestors, their great-grandfathers and everything, they came from Europe. They came from England, Scotland, Ireland. They came in that area, and to them, English nobility was high up there. Like the English standard of cooking and dressing was like the trendsetter in the world. So this is the standard that they set for the old money. As for the new money, it was different. If you can look at Mrs. Russell's house, the style amongst the nouveau riche, the new rich people, was French. To them, French was everything. They had French provincial decor. You can see Mrs. Russell, her footmen are dressed in very ornate French type court from Versailles. And they have gold, they have diamonds, their house is overly decorated with really rich and expensive things. They consider it like if you ain't never had money, then you're gonna act like you've never had money. So you walking around acting like you ain't never had nothing. So it's kind of like new rich people overdo it. That they feel like they have a need to just be grandiose and showy, and that was very much frowned upon in the Gilded Age. So that's explanation about that. So Peggy, her article is very popular with Mr. Fortune. She meets with him, and he tells her that her article has actually added more readership and has helped the newspaper. Peggy's proud about that. She goes to see her mom. Her father's not there. She talks to her mother and tells her about the newspaper and everything, and then the mom is like, when we read, her Her father's still not happy over this. Again, I hate to be the Debbie Downer in this situation, y'all. I really do. But this Peggy storyline is just boring me to death. Like, I'm like, I'm bored. Like, I need more. I need Peggy to really to do more. Like, this is like, okay, like, I'm like ready to move on. Like, Peggy, I don't know, she needs a love life, she needs a man, she needs something, because this story with Peggy, I don't know, it's gonna pick up in episode 7, but these past 3 or 4 episodes, yeah, we know she don't like her father, yeah, we know she's having issues with her parents, yeah, we get it. They're not really explaining anything. I'm just ready for this to just move on. Okay. So the Russells, they found out that, like I was saying, that there was old parts that apparently they've been paying for good parts, but that whoever's building the train was using old parts. So, Mr. Russell was upset. Gladys has a letter from Archie. Now, in the last episode, Archie, the Archibald, the guy that Miss Gladys liked, and the dad basically blackmailed him into look, I'll give you this really good job, you have this position, yada yada yada, if you just leave my daughter alone. I mean, yeah, I kind of feel bad that he shouldn't have took it, because if you really love somebody, but then they offered him a position and offer that he couldn't refuse, and especially if you're a young man coming up in the banking industry, and this is the kind of offer they offer you. Like, I wasn't really mad at Archie, but he sent Gladys a nice letter, and he was trying to throw her hints in the letter, like little smoke signals, like, look, your dad put me in this corner and I couldn't really do anything. And then Mrs. Russell didn't want to give Gladys the letter, but by that time, Mr. Russell's kind of had it, and so he goes and talks to Gladys and gives her the letter, and she reads it. And Gladys, Gladys is naive and sheltered, but she kind of hip to the game. Like, she tells her dad, like, you pretty much let your wife dictate to you and do everything. And that kind of took him, you can see his mind was like he, you can see his wheels was kind of turning. And I was like, yeah, Mr. Russell, you kind of let Bertha punk you, this is what we have to do. And then, Gladys is upset because she's like, I want to marry this person. And he was telling her, well, Gladys, your mom doesn't think you're ordinary and wants you to marry higher than your station and wants you to marry. Bertha's scheming to get her daughter a really good marriage. And Mr. Russell just wants her to have a marriage where she can have what he has, which is a marriage of somebody that she loves and cares for and want to be with, and that she's happy. But, so I guess Mr. Russell wants the best of both worlds. He wants his wife to be happy, he wants Gladys to be happy too. I don't know if that's going to happen. But Gladys is like, I'm ordinary, and I have to say that kind of touched me, because I'm torn, because I understand that you want your children to live their life and be happy, and especially back then, the morals and the customs of the day was so different. But that kind of touched me, because I'm like, am I Bertha Russell? I mean, not with my kids marrying well, but my kids are like, we just want to be normal, and I'm thinking to myself, do I want my kids just to be ordinary? Like, I don't know. Like, I had to really think about it. It made me think like, am I that parent? But I'm kind of am that parent. Like, I don't want my kids to feel like they're just ordinary. I want my kids to feel like they can do anything they want to and go out and do great things. So I feel Bertha Russell on that part. So then we get to Mary and the aunts. They are discussing Mrs. Russell and the rakes. Of course, Auntie Pooh don't approve. She does not approve at all of Mr. Ray, Mrs. Russell, Marion hanging out with them, but they to the point where now they we can only hold her in so much, that she is a grown woman, and she she has to feel her own way through New York society. So then downstairs with the servant, Mr. Bannister gets a note from Mrs. Russell's butler. I forgot his name. I forgot his name. Is it Chase or Mr. Chase? I don't know. So he goes out over there and helps them, and they're asking about the English style, and like the Russells butler and the French cook. This had me cracking up, this whole entire debacle, because he's like, you got to put the fork this way, and you got to do this, and what are you serving? And he's like, you can't serve this, you can't serve that, and what about this? And they were like, oh no, we ain't. They're like, asparagus, oh my God.
Yuck! Yuck!
They were like, heck no. They, so then Mrs. Russell kind of like overhears them, and so she offers Mr. Bannister like $100 if he come over there during the lunch service. And I mean, I think $100 in their money is kind of like $1,500. So yeah, if you want to offer me $1,500 to come over there and lunch, okay. Heck, I would have been there. But so he agrees, but he knows he has to do it behind Ms. Van Rhyme's back. He knows he's gonna have to do it. So then Larry is talking with Larry, the Russell son. They're having lunch and everything, and she's talking about Mrs. Fish is having a doll tea party. Now, I personally didn't know what in the world was a doll tea party, but apparently it looked bizarre. So apparently there was really a real Mamie Fish who was one of the Mrs. Astor's 400, which is the 400 richest family. And apparently Miss Mamie Fish threw these, I mean, she was old money, but she threw these quirky, really weird, extravagant parties. Yes, they had doll parties. But she had other parties where there were vaudeville performers in the ballroom. She apparently pushed the envelope. She was hosting some mysterious princes, and all her guests were arrived to find the prince was just a monkey in an evening dress. So there was this monkey dinner. Another party, she rented an elephant and dancers and fed the elephants peanuts to entertain her guests. And then there was another party where people dressed up as peasants. So apparently Miss Mamie Fish was just eccentric. She was just a rich, old money weirdo that everybody just kind of like dealt with it because she had old money. So her parties was something that it place to be invited to. So Larry and Gladys go to Mamie's Fish party, and so Gladys strikes up a conversation. Mrs. Astor's daughter. And they strike up a conversation, and apparently Mrs. Astor's daughter is crying because she's like, my mother's harsh, and she's crying because she's in love with somebody, but they don't want her to marry somebody either. And Gladys is like, girl, we right here. So Mrs. Astor's daughter asks Gladys, can I call on you? I can come visit you. So it's a good thing that Gladys was finally getting friends and getting out the house. Like, whew, I was like, yes, queen, yes. Okay, girl. Free Gladys. Anyway, so then Marion visits Miss Chamberlain. She runs into Larry. Larry apparently wants to be an architect, and he's hiding it from his parents. Okay, that's a thing. Cool. It really wasn't. It was probably frowned upon. I mean, he works as a banker with his dad, but being an architect, I guess he could do that on the side. I don't know. We'll see. So Marion meets Miss Chamberlain, tells her what Miss Chamberlain, if you haven't seen my previous videos, please go watch them where I get down into the real Mrs. Chamberlain, who she's based upon. But yeah, she was having an affair with Mr. Chamberlain, and most likely their son was illegitimate, and then his wife died, and then they got married, and then she was married to somebody, he was married to somebody, and she most likely had her son illegitimately with Mr. Chamberlain. And she said, yeah, what everybody said was true about her. But before her husband died, they had to respect her. But then once her husband died, they just didn't want to mess. They didn't want to mess with her no more. They was just like, okay, girl, like we don't messing with you. We don't have to give you no respect. And so, so Marion tells her that she's in love with somebody. She wants to be with somebody. And so Miss Chamberlain says, well, you just meet him here, girl. Just bring him here. I was like, oh Lord, I can see this ending in disaster. Because the last time that they met, that they was together, kind of, by themselves, it went down. So I don't know what's going to happen now, but I guess it's okay because, and she tells Marion, it's best that y'all really get to know each other, that you can't really get to know somebody and whatever Mr. Rakes' motivations are by seeing each other like 30 minutes here, 10 minutes here, that they really should get to know each other. So, and I agree with that. So yes, like I was saying, Gladys got a friend. Mrs. Astor's daughters come over, and of course Bertha is ecstatic because, That's Mrs. Astor, the keys to the city. And so they agree to have some a type of gathering where they're going to invite men and women, and they practice dancing. We'll get into this in the next video, episode 7, if they do what this dance and what this thing was called. Well, there's a history behind that. We'll get into that. What else? Mr. Bannister tells Mrs. Van Rhymes that he has to go see a lawyer, and he can only see the lawyer during lunchtime. The lawyer can't come there, and he has to go see the lawyer in the lawyer's office. So, Agnes and Miss Van Rhymes is like, what? Like, oh, okay. And they give him permission to take off for like an hour and a half, 2 hours to go see the lawyer, which really he's just going over to the Russells. So Bannister goes over to the Russells. He has Mr. Church and the French chef, and he's like just telling them this and telling them that. And Mr. Bannister is loving every minute of it. He just seems so snooty and arrogant, and you can tell he sees the house and he's like, whoa. But then once he realizes in the kitchen what's going on, he puts on this air of British superiority, and yeah, he's over there helping them. So then it's lunchtime, and lunchtime is splendid. Mrs. Russell gives gifts. She has flowers, a nice setup. Marion walks in and sees Bannister, and then she was like, what are you doing here? And then she tells him, it'll be our little secret. But at lunchtime, it's lavish. Mr. McAllister arrives, and everything seems to go well. Back at the Van Rhymes, Bannister leaves John in charge, and he is a nervous wreck because there's protocols to take you have to put your gloves on while serving the food, and then you have to take the gloves off when serving the wine or the drinks. Like, it's a whole protocol, and he's nervous, and he's young, and he's trying. He's really, 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 really trying. But he's just confused and nervous. And while he's shaking and nervous, a letter comes in. And I'm like, huh? And so there's a note comes in, and Mrs. Van Rhymes stands up and was like, oh no, heck no. So Mrs. Van Rhymes takes off across the street. I want to know who wrote the letter. Now, I have some theories. We're going to get into that in a moment. So she runs over to the Russells. She enters the house, and the way she looks at the huge chandelier in the ceiling just cracked me up. Her look was like, oh my God. Like, she was in shock. Like, she was shook for a second. Then she walked in, and then everybody's having lunch, and then they were like, oh, well, they all were trying to, like, save face and cover, but the way she bursted in, she saw Bannister and was like, her eyes got big, and she was about to read them for Phil. She was about to explode, child. But she realized that Mr. McAllister is there. Other people are there. If she would have exploded and went crazy and went bad on everybody, it would have been a total embarrassment to her. And it would have looked bad on her. It wouldn't have looked bad on Mrs. Russell. It would have looked bad on her. And the fact that her butler was over there, and that would have got out. So you can see the wheels turning in her mind. And Christine Baranski, like, her acting is like, her face acting, it's like you could tell that she was constraining herself. It was like, oh, well, I came over at the wrong time, and sorry to interrupt. And yeah, like, so she just played it off that she was invited, that she came, she got the time mixed up, and that she had to leave. And she, turns around and leaves, and then she tells Bannister, she whispers to him and says, heads have rolled for less. So she's mad at Bannister, really. And at this time, I'm thinking that he's eventually going to get fired. So Miss Van Rhyme, she turns around and hightails it and go back home. So I thought that was very interesting. Meanwhile, Mrs. Armstrong is about to leave, and she sees Oscar with Miss Turner. Now, because she sees Oscar with Miss Turner, I don't know who wrote the letter. Like, I was thinking it was Miss Turner. Miss Turner is the one that was trying to get with Mr. Russell and was trying to get him in bed. And so her and Oscar, like, talk, and she's giving Oscar information about Gladys and how she can get in. And I thought it was Mrs. Armstrong that wrote, I'm sorry, not Mrs. Armstrong. I thought it was Mrs. Turner that wrote the letter. But now I don't know. So later on that night, Mrs. Van Rhyme is obviously upset. She said that, I guess her whole life is about keeping her composure and not letting her emotions get the best of her. And so she tells Mrs. Armstrong that, she almost lost it, and it could have really embarrassed her and her family. But she don't ever want to feel like that again. And then Mrs. Armstrong was like, well, shoot, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but there's something else. And she whispers and tells her about, I guess, Oscar meeting with Mrs. Turner, which is the Russell's maid, which is the Russell's, Mrs. Russell's lady. She's the one that dresses her and everything. And so Mrs. Van Rhyme is like, she's like, leave. She tells Mr. Armstrong, leave. She's obviously upset and hurt and probably confused, and was like thinking that people are turning against her, or maybe secretly plotting against her, or don't know what's going on. So she's a little shook. So then we get down to the end of the episode, and at the very end, the Russells get a telegraph, and they find out that I'm assuming it was the man who had the designs for the train or built the train, saying that it was built with shoddy materials, and yes, that it was Mr. Russell. He has proof in writing that Mr. Russell authorized him to build this train with subpar materials, and he has proof. Now, back in the day, if you were found to be a person that had something built with shoddy materials, it was against the law. It was illegal. You could end up in jail. They could seize your property and your money. There would be expensive court costs. You'll be a trial and everything else. We found that you were negligent, or you were willfully negligent in running your company unscrupulously, shoddy materials, violating. There was all kinds of coming into its own railroad laws about what kind of materials you could use, how heavy the trains were, how light the trains were, what kind of engine the train had, all these types of things. There were various laws because, again, working in a rail yard and working on a train, especially when you're talking about steam engines, and if the engines weren't constructed right or made right, they could blow up and kill innocent people on the train. And then as a company, you will be liable to pay out settlements, not only to the workers, but then to the people who were on the train that died, like people just traveling. And then you would also be liable to pay out settlements to the government. So Mr. Russell is for sure really worried, because he was telling his wife and telling his people in his office that he did not give this order, that he did not authorize shoddy materials, and the fact that this other person has written proof that Mr. Russell did. Yeah, that's good. Definitely going to put him in the hot seat. I also learned that Mr. Russell is patterned after a real person by the name of Jay Gould. In my next video, we're going to get into Jay Gould and who he was. He was a railroad magnate, real estate person. He had 6 kids. He was a titan of industry during that time that a lot of people, I think, have never really heard of. I never heard of Jay Gould. So we're going to get into Jay Gould and his life for our next video. But that's it. That's my take on episode 6 for Gilded Age. What did you think? Did you like this episode? I like this episode. It was twists and turns. Again, I said my only complaint is I'm ready for Peggy's story to kind of pick up, because I'm tired of her fighting with her mom and her dad, and I'm just like, why are y'all fighting? Can we get over this? Can we have her do something else? I'm kind of over that. I don't know who sent the letter. So I'm kind of interested to know. I'm really curious as to who would try to sabotage, besides Miss Turner, who would try to sabotage. But she was gone with Oscar, so I don't know the timing. Maybe she wrote the letter earlier and then told people to send the letter off. But I would think that anytime you're delivering a letter like that somebody had to deliver it. You had to take it from one footman to the next. So I think if she was delivering a letter like that, somebody would have said something or saw or asked some questions. I don't know. We'll see. And like I said, I still have to watch episode 7. So anyway, like, share, subscribe, comment, and until next time, y'all. If I can learn how to talk, I have braces, so it's kind of hard for me to enunciate. I got bottom braces, and I have top braces, and I got bottom braces now. And the reason why I've been gone, my face looked like a chipmunk, and it was really, really swollen, and my mouth hurt, and I had a sick kitty, and a lot of things were going on. But hopefully, I can get back on track, do videos regularly for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed. And so that's it. You guys have a great, 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 great day.